If you drive through Finnmark in northern Norway, you maybe have noticed that the older buildings, they all look almost the same. And there's a reason for that.
I'm Jakob, 71 degrees north.
This is the image I had of my dad's childhood home when I was a child. The picture hung on the wall at home, and for a long time this was what I had in mind when I thought of my father as a child. It was a familiar place. There was the main building, the cattle house with the hayloft and the outhouse, the small shed called Sjåen, and the woodshed a little further away. As I grew older, I began to understand that this was not at all the home that he had grown up in. And this small shed in the middle of the yard, which I had never seen in real life, tells a dark and rather unpleasant story. When I asked about the house that no longer exists, I was told that it was the finska gammen, the Finnish shed. That's where we lived the first winter after the evacuation, my dad used to explain. The older I got, the more I began to understand that something had happened back then, when Dad was just a young boy. Something that people didn't like to talk about, at least not with children. Now, of course, I understand more. During the World War II, the Germans occupied Norway, and in the late autumn/winter in 1944, the Germans were losing the war. They were forced out of northern Finland, out of Russia and the northeast of Norway. When the Germans eventually understood that they had to retreat, Hitler ordered the retreat with the scorched earth tactic. All civilians were to be deported from the whole of Finnmark and Nord-Troms. They had to leave everything they own behind. And everything they left behind was burned down and destroyed. About 12,000 houses were burned. Boats and ships were destroyed, and roads and bridges and telegraph lines were bombed into gravel and dust. Around 50,000 people were driven from their homes, and all their homes were destroyed. Most of them were deported to the south, but many of them defied the occupying forces and fled into the mountains, where they hid, even though this was punishable by death. Now, this video isn't about that terrible things that happened during that forced evacuation. But if you want to understand why no one wanted to talk about that, you can Google Death Ship Karl Arp, a cargo ship that carried over 1,800 civilians and German war supplies from Porsanger southbound. My father and his family were on that ship. Here's a picture of him. He was 15 years old at that time. This video is about my house and the rebuilding of this part of the country. When the war finally ended on 7th of May 1945, the Norwegian government decided to support those who wanted to move back and rebuild Finnmark. It was a giant task. Prime Minister Einar Gerhardsen summed it up like this: in its brutal simplicity, the problems are as follows. For a population of 70,000 people, there is still only housing for 10,000. The Norwegian government had a few types of houses planned. These houses were built as prefabricated houses and transported up to Finnmark. Reconstruction houses, gjenreisningshus. My father wrote as a postscript to his diary that he had been writing throughout the forced evacuation, quote, "On May 7th, we were back in Oldefjord. A year and a half after we left our home on November 6th of 1944. Much has changed here. The old houses were gone, and here and there new temporary houses were starting to rise. The house that my older brother had arranged for us was not big, but there was room for all of us. We lived there for a whole winter. In the summer of 1947, we had our permanent house finished. It was a pre-built house, which was shipped north from southern Norway. It was designated as Type D36. And that house still stands there in Oldefjord." End of quote. And indeed, here it still stands, along with many more of these gjenreisningshus, as a reminder not only of a tragedy, but also of an will to rise again. It's quite a big responsibility to take care of a piece of history, and I feel like it's not really my house. I've just been given the honor to take care of it for a while. And I feel that the rightful owners and their families are watching closely. I hope not to disappoint them.
So next time you see one of these houses, it could be a reminder that we shouldn't let human stupidity burn down a whole part of a country.